This story does not begin with a discovery. It begins with a mistake that should never have happened. A single decision sets off a chain reaction across systems and human lives. And once it starts, there is no pause button. What if the danger is not an alien weapon? What if it is a rule we trusted for decades? One person sees the problem first, but speaking up may cost everything. The question is simple: do they follow orders and survive, or break the system and change the future? Listen closely, because by the end, you may not agree with the choice they make. Late harvest season. The coastal wind shoved salt deeper into the fields. Daniel Park crouched at Saltwind monitoring station and watched the numbers climb again. The salinity line had been creeping inland for years. Tonight it jumped like a flare. If it stayed this high for 2 more tide cycles, the next flush would fail. Seedlings would burn. Sableford Village would lose another season it could not afford. Daniel was the lead field engineer for the Coastal Soil Renewal Initiative. He could read soil the way other people read faces. He pinched a bit of dirt and rubbed it between his fingers. It felt wrong. The grains were sharp and too clean, like life had stepped back. That was the part that scared him, not the salt alone, but the silence under it. A crunch of footsteps came from the dry ridge behind him. Daniel turned, already bracing for an argument. A woman stood at the edge of the glossy mud, careful not to step into the salt sheen. She wore a gray field jacket with deep pockets and a sun hat that looked new. A small satchel sat tight against her ribs, like it was the only thing she trusted. "Daniel Park?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Who are you?" She offered a plain card with no logo. "Lyra Vesh," she said, "environmental consultant." Daniel took the card and looked at her hands. They were bare, but she held them slightly apart, as if the air itself was dirty. "You came out here for a consultation?" he asked. "Most people call me to complain." Lyra's eyes stayed on the field and the station display. "May I ask questions?" she said. Her English sounded practiced, not casual. It sounded like it had been learned for a purpose. Daniel nodded once. "Ask." Lyra pulled disposable gloves from her jacket pocket and put them on. Then she drew a small sealed vial from her satchel and held it with steady care. "How long has the salt line been moving inland?" she asked. "Years," Daniel said. "Storm surges, drought, less river push." "And your remediation plan?" she asked. "Compost and gypsum, fresh water flushes when you can. Cover crops?" Daniel stared. That was too accurate for a stranger. "You read our public report?" he asked. Lyra did not answer directly. "Does it restore the living community?" she asked. "Not yield, the living part." Daniel felt a prick of unease. Not mysticism, just the intensity of her focus. "You mean microbes?" he asked. Lyra nodded. A few farmers watched from the far end of the levee, pretending not to. Daniel knew what they were thinking. Strangers take things and leave promises. Daniel also knew what he was thinking now. Why would a so-called consultant care about microbes more than crops? And why did she sound like time was chasing her? "If you want a sample," Daniel said, "you ask them. This land is not a free shelf." Lyra walked to the farmers first. She spoke simply and respectfully. She asked permission to take a handful of soil and share results. The oldest farmer looked to Daniel. Daniel nodded. After a quiet moment, the farmer nodded back. Lyra returned to the dry ridge and knelt. She used a sterile scoop. She took from the surface, then a shallow layer beneath. Like she knew the difference mattered. She sealed the soil in a clear Bioseal canister, pressed a strip that changed color, and waited until it locked. When she stood, her face held the calm focus of someone working under a deadline. Behind it, Daniel caught something raw: hurry, loneliness, and a fear that did not look like fear of people. Daniel thought of his mother, who used to say land remembers every hand that asks from it. Lyra looked like someone asking the land to remember her. "If you want lab work," Daniel said, "Dr. Hannah Vu can help. She runs the Mudroot Microbial lab. It is small, but she is honest." Lyra's gaze sharpened at the name. "Today?" she asked. Daniel looked at the light sliding toward evening and felt the tide clock in his bones. Today, he said, come on. They walked the levee path toward Daniel's truck. Lyra peeled off her gloves without snapping them. She folded them inward and sealed them in a small waist pouch. Daniel offered her a bottle of water. She accepted it, but she did not drink. Even thirst seemed to wait until the next step was secure. On the drive, Daniel kept thinking about the station display. Salinity rising again. Time running short. If his delta was losing ground, Lyra was acting like her whole world was. He asked the question he should have asked first. Lyra, he said, what is the real question you came here to answer? Lyra looked out at the fields and narrow canals. Whether your soil can still carry a living library, she said, and whether anyone here will let me borrow a page. Daniel tightened his grip on the steering wheel. If her need was real, was he about to help save a distant world, or help trigger a disaster on his own? Mudroot Microbial Lab sat behind a repair shop and banana trees. It was close enough to the coast that salt still hung in the air. The lab was a cramped room with a sink, a workbench, and a humming sterile hood that sounded like an old air conditioner. Dr. Hannah Vu looked up from a microscope as Daniel pushed through plastic strip curtains. Daniel, Hannah said, if you brought me more brine, I will invoice your soul. I brought you a consultant, Daniel said, Lyra Vesh. Hannah's eyes flicked to Lyra, then to the Bioseal canister. She did not reach for it yet. She watched the way Lyra held her satchel close, and the way she kept a careful distance from the bench. Lyra spoke first. Dr. Vu, I need to know whether this soil holds a diverse microbial community that is still viable. Hannah blinked. Most people ask if the soil can grow rice. She said, you ask if it can carry a living library. It is important, Lyra said. Hannah washed her hands, put on gloves, and motioned them to the back bench. She opened the canister, took a tiny subsample, and ran it through a sterile sieve kit. Then she placed it into a battered rapid field sequencer. Daniel leaned against the doorway. He tried to treat the moment as normal. Lyra stood too still, like movement could spoil the result. Hannah glanced up without breaking her rhythm. You are not local, Hannah said, and you do not move like a tourist. Where are you from? Lyra looked at Daniel first, then back to Hannah. I am from Vesh, she said. Daniel swallowed. That is not a country, he said. It is not on your maps, Lyra replied. Hannah did not laugh. Her voice stayed low and steady. You are saying you are not from Earth? She asked. Lyra nodded once. The sterile hood hummed. Outside, a motorbike passed and faded. Daniel felt the ordinary world keep moving while their small room tilted into something bigger. Why tell us? Hannah asked. Because I cannot take what I need by theft, Lyra said, and because time is not on my side. Daniel heard himself ask the question he had been avoiding. What do you need? He said. Lyra touched the canister with 2 fingertips. A living community, she said, not one strain, not a drug. My world is losing its soil. Plants fail, then insects, then people, she continued. We can repair machines. We cannot rebuild what we do not have. Hannah studied her face. You think this delta can save your planet? She said. I think it can help seed recovery. Lyra said. Your soil has been stressed and salted and still holds life. It has learned resilience through hardship. She added. The sequencer chimed. Hannah looked at the screen. Then at Daniel. It is alive, she said, more alive than I expected for this salinity level. There is diversity here. Lyra exhaled like a person for the first time. The change was small, but Daniel saw it. It pulled at something inside him. Not fantasy, responsibility. Hannah removed her gloves and folded them inward. If this is real, she said, you need a legal path. You need oversight. You need a chain of custody our side can trust and your side can verify. I will accept quarantine, Lyra said. I will accept limits. I need only enough to begin. Daniel opened his mouth to answer, but heavier tires outside cut him off. A vehicle slowed, then stopped. Not a farmer, not a delivery. Lyra turned toward the door. The calm left her eyes. They found me, she said. The first visitors wore clean boots and carried rugged tablets. 2 uniformed officers followed, sidearms visible but untouched. Deputy Marshal Colm Reyes stepped through the plastic curtains with a polite face that left no room for refusal. "Dr. Hannah Vu?" Reyes asked. Hannah stepped forward. "Yes." Reyes raised a badge and a paper with a seal. "By authority of the Earth Biosecurity Directorate, this facility is under inspection," he said. "We have reason to believe an unauthorized biological transfer is in progress." Daniel's stomach tightened. He looked at the BioSeal canister on the bench. Hannah kept her voice steady. "What reason?" she asked. Reyes angled his tablet. A map, a route trace, a moving dot that had led them here. Daniel understood at once. In a world full of sensors, quiet travel was not invisible travel. Reyes nodded toward Lyra. "Identify yourself," he said. Lyra stood straight, hands visible. "I am Lyra Vesh," she said. "I am requesting permission to study local soil microbes for ecological restoration." Reyes did not argue. He touched his earpiece. "Director Hargrove," he said, "we are on site. Subject confirmed. Sample present." A calm voice answered, too faint for Daniel to catch every word, but firm enough to feel like a door closing. Reyes lowered his hand. "Director Elaine Hargrove is invoking emergency containment protocols," Reyes said. "All materials in question will be seized, sealed, and transferred to the sample vault." One inspector approached the bench with gloved hands. Hannah placed her palm in front of the canister. "This is local research," she said. "Nothing is leaving this region." Reyes kept his tone gentle. "Doctor, this is not about your project," he said. "This is about preventing an uncontrolled biological event." Daniel stepped in. "No one is releasing anything," he said. "She asked for consent." Reyes read from his tablet. "Daniel Park, Coastal Soil Renewal Initiative," he said. "You are to remain on site. Your communications will be limited until the investigation is complete," he added. The word limited sounded polite, but it carried the weight of a cage. Daniel thought of the village, the medicine runs, the road that was their lifeline. He pictured the clinic shelf, half empty already, and the old men who pretended they were not worried. Lyra spoke toward the room, like Director Hargrove could hear through the earpiece and the walls. "I will submit to quarantine," she said. "I will be observed. I am asking for a channel, not a breach." Reyes listened, then nodded once. "The subject will be placed under supervision," he said. "No unsanctioned travel, no unsanctioned contact." The inspector lifted the BioSeal canister and placed it into a hard case. A seal strip turned bright as it locked. Lyra watched it change color. Daniel saw the moment land like grief. It was not the loss of soil. It was the loss of time. Reyes handed Hannah a notice. "Cooperate and this will move faster," he said. He turned to Daniel. "Do not leave Sableford Village," he said. He turned to Lyra. "You will come with us," he said. Lyra glanced at Daniel as she passed, her expression held together by discipline. "Do not do anything reckless," she said. Daniel did not answer. Cameras were everywhere, and fear had become policy. By nightfall, the road checkpoints on Namaru Provincial Road 9 turned the village into an island. 3 days after the seals went on, the checkpoint lights never slept. Sableford Village woke to the same scene each morning. A pair of trucks across Namaru Provincial Road 9 and a row of portable lights humming in the fog. People lined up with bags of rice and cooking oil, holding papers like prayer. A loudspeaker played the same calm message on repeat. Controls were temporary. Controls were for safety. Some families stopped waving at neighbors. A borrowed shovel became a risk. A shared cup became a rumor. Daniel Park heard his own name in the whispers. Not shouted, traded. He hated how fast fear learned new routes. He walked past the line with his project badge held out, feeling the weight of every stare. A woman he had worked with for years turned her face away. Like recognition could be contagious. At the Quarantine Operations Command trailer, Deputy Marshal Colm Reyes met him at the door. Reyes looked tired but precise. The kind of tired that comes from paperwork and patrols at once. Behind him, screens showed camera feeds of roads, docks, and the Mudroot Microbial lab. Daniel Park, Reyes said, "You are cleared to enter." Daniel asked, "Is Lyra okay?" Reyes held his gaze. "She is contained," he said. "That is all I can promise." Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant and instant coffee. A woman in a clean jacket stood by a monitor wall, hair pinned back, eyes never stopping on one screen for long. Daniel recognized her from the earlier brief, the calm tone that had closed the door without raising it. Mira Dellin, risk analyst for the Earth Biosecurity Directorate, said, "We have your device trail. We have her route history. We have the soil canister chain of custody." Mira slid a thin folder across the desk. Photos of Lyra at the levee. A timestamped log of Daniel's truck. A still frame from the lab camera. Seeing his day turned into evidence made Daniel feel like his own memory had been seized. "She asked permission," Daniel said. "The farmers agreed." "Consent does not remove risk," Mira said. "Risk does not wait for permission." A speaker on the desk lit, and director Elaine Hargrove came through in clear audio. The tone carried no drama and no warmth, only certainty that sounded like policy. "Mr. Park, this is not about intent," Elaine said. "This is about containment." "Containment of what?" Daniel said. "She touched local soil. She did not release anything?" Elaine paused long enough to feel deliberate. "You do not know what she carries," she said. "You do not know what she sheds. You do not know what she might request next. You know enough biology to understand that a small breach becomes a large one." Elaine added. Mira tapped the screen, showing magnified microbes turned into abstract shapes. "Public Health Liaison Office is drafting guidance," Mira said. "We will need your cooperation to keep this from becoming panic." Daniel heard the shift. He was no longer a project lead. He was a tool, a familiar face they could place in front of a fearful village. "You will give an interview that frames this as precaution," Elaine said. "You will not mention off-world origin. You will not mention any request for transfer," she continued. Daniel asked, "And if I refuse?" Reyes answered softly, like he wished the words were not his. "Then your access is revoked," he said. "You will be held for questioning. Your phone will be sealed." Reyes continued, "Your project equipment will be tagged and stored." Outside, a new poster went up on plywood. A simple drawing of hands under a faucet and rules in clean lettering. It told people not to share food or tools, and to report fever or unusual behavior. Underneath, a small logo read Public Health Liaison Office. That evening, the clinic nurse called Daniel and then hung up, afraid the line was monitored. The next supply truck was turned back at the checkpoint because a driver coughed. The rumor became a verdict. Daniel watched two neighbors read the poster and then glance at each other like strangers. One stepped back like distance could prove loyalty. The system did not need guns to divide them. It only needed a story that made fear feel responsible. Reyes escorted Daniel back toward the road, the lights buzzing above the checkpoint like insects. Daniel looked toward the small building where Lyra was held, curtains drawn, cameras fixed. He understood then that saving her would not be a rescue. It would be an argument against a machine that believed it was doing the right thing. That afternoon, the wind shifted, and salt dust rotted into every open window. Lyra Vesh sat in a plain room with a single table bolted to the floor. A camera in the corner blinked a small red light, steady and patient. A bioseal strip marked the door. A guard sat outside with a tablet and a cup of tea gone cold. Dr. Hannah Vu arrived under escort. Hands empty, pockets turned out. Daniel was allowed in after a search, his phone placed in a sealed bag with a barcode. It felt like being disarmed in a world where words were weapons. "Thank you," Lyra said. "I was not sure you would come. If you are asking for soil transfer, you will not get it by charm," Hannah said. "You will get it by lowering risk and proving it." Lyra nodded. "I want a lawful path," she said. "Supervision, limits, transparency. I will accept all of it." Hannah placed a folded salt intrusion map on the table. Ink lines traced the delta like veins. It showed where brine had pushed in and where freshwater still fought back. This is why this place matters. Hannah said, stress selects for survivors. Survivors carry tools. Hannah pointed to fields that had been flooded and replanted again and again. Each cycle forced microbes to adapt. She said, if we move them wrong, they die. And if they live in the wrong place, they could disrupt what still works here. She added. Daniel heard the warning under the hope. It sounded like a price tag. Hannah slid a thin report across the table, stamped and signed with her lab code. This delta has a microbial reservoir. She said, years of farming, floods, and salt stress pushed the community into strange resilience. It is rare, Hannah added. Our soil lost that resilience. Lyra said, plants fail first, then insects, then children. A ceiling speaker clicked on. Director Elaine Hargrove joined the room without entering it, and the microphone made the air feel smaller. Princess Lyra Vesh, Elaine said, state your request and your timeline. I request controlled sampling under your oversight. Lyra said, not extraction, not stripping. A measured approach that we replenish. She continued. Timeline? Elaine asked. Lyra inhaled once. We have weeks, not months, she said. Our coastal farms are collapsing. Our clinics are rationing nutrition supplements. Lyra added, if we do not seed recovery soon, we cross a point where the soil cannot carry food again. Daniel saw Hannah shift beside him. Weeks was not a bargaining chip. It was a countdown. We can design a protocol, Hannah said, multiple sites, small quantities, sterile transfer containers. Full chain of custody, Hannah continued, independent audits by both sides. Your words are acceptable, Elaine said, your presence is still an unknown. Unknowns do not travel, she added. If you keep me here until my world dies, what do you call that? Lyra asked. Elaine answered without anger. I call it triage, she said, my mandate is Earth first. My duty is to prevent a global event I cannot undo. Elaine continued. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. If he defended Lyra too hard, he became the reason the village stayed sealed. If he stayed silent, he became a witness to quiet extinction. Lyra looked at him, not pleading and not demanding. Daniel, I will not ask you to betray your people, she said. I am only asking you not to pretend this is not real. He met her gaze. In that room of cameras and seals, trust felt like the only free thing left. By the third night, the checkpoint generator sputtered twice before it steadied, and the village held its breath with it. A new screen appeared in the Quarantine Operations Command trailer. Flagged as external contact, Mira Dellin stood beside it, pen poised, face unreadable. Deputy Marshal Colm Reyes checked the perimeter cameras, then nodded to the technician. The display filled with a starfield and a tight image of a ship hull. Clean lines reflecting sunlight. Text identified the source as the relief fleet of Vesh. Daniel was brought in under guard, not as a guest, but as an observed variable. Identify yourself, Elaine said. A man appeared, seated in a stark chair. His suit was plain, his eyes were focused, his voice was measured like a report. Chancellor Varric Soren, he said, Vesh Regency Council, Vesh Survival Ministry. You are inside Earth orbit, Elaine said. You are violating our exclusion request. Varric's mouth moved in something that was not quite a smile. We are not here to threaten, he said. We are here to prevent a death spiral. Mira leaned in and whispered to Elaine's microphone line. But Daniel could not hear the words. He watched the live feed of the ship hull and felt small. Not romantic small, storm small. We offer water filtration modules, Varric said, salt barrier membranes, soil recovery units. We will deploy them to Brinefield Delta at no cost. He continued. In exchange, we request a regulated microbial sample package. Properly sealed, properly audited, Varric added. You are proposing a trade, Elaine said. You are proposing a foothold. It is a bridge, Varric said. A bridge built with invoices, not weapons. Elaine answered with the clarity of someone trained to see traps. A bridge becomes a road, she said. A road becomes leverage. Leverage becomes loss of sovereignty. Elaine continued. Varric looked directly into the camera. How long do you think you have to debate? He asked. Your committees can meet forever. Our soil cannot, he added. Daniel heard the question like a hammer. It was not bombs. It was time. Your technology is not neutral. Elaine said. A relief corridor becomes a supply chain. A supply chain becomes dependency. She continued. Dependency is a story you tell yourself to delay. Varric said. We are offering you tools you are already trying to build. We are offering you speed. He added. Reyes shifted his stance, watching Daniel like he was gauging whether he would run. Mira wrote a note, pen scratching steadily. Elaine said nothing for a full breath, then spoke. Your offer is noted, she said. Any transfer will be decided by Earth authorities. Any unauthorized action will be treated as hostile. Elaine added. Varric nodded once, like that reply was expected. Then I will give you one more thing, he said, a schedule. You will see it soon enough. Varric added. The feed cut. The trailer fell quiet except for soft fans and distant loudspeaker calls. Daniel stepped outside and looked up, like the answer might be written on the clouds. High above the black line of sea, a faint metallic shimmer crossed the sky and disappeared. It was not a star. It moved with purpose. Across the village, dogs barked and then went quiet. A fisherman stepped out onto his porch and stared upward with his mouth half open. Daniel imagined the same reaction spreading along the coast. People looking up and realizing the sky had new owners. At dawn, the horizon carried a thin glint that did not belong to weather. A week into quarantine, the village learned how loud an empty shelf could be. The line at Namaru Provincial Road 9 no longer looked like a temporary checkpoint. It looked like a border. Floodlights, a portable scanner arch, guards who stopped smiling on day 3. Sableford Village still woke up at the same hour. But now people woke up to calculate, not to work. Daniel Park stood outside the Quarantine Operations Command trailer as a small crowd gathered near the roadblock. Someone had spread a rumor that a supply truck was coming, and rumor had become the main currency in town. A woman held her child close and stared at Daniel like he had written the rules. Deputy Marshal Colm Reyes stepped out with a clipboard and a tired face that still carried authority. 2 officers followed, hands resting near their belts in a way that signaled caution, not aggression. Daniel saw the fear in their posture, and he hated that he could not blame them. We need medicine, a man yelled. My father cannot breathe. The clinic truck is being inspected, Reyes said. Stand back and we can move faster. Another voice cut in, sharp and accusing. Move faster for who? For the off-world woman? Daniel felt the words off-world land like a stone. He kept his voice steady, because any tremor could be turned into guilt. She did not hurt anyone, Daniel said. She asked for permission. Someone spat on the ground. And now we cannot leave, the man said. A truck engine growled behind the barricade, then went quiet again. The delay felt personal, even if it was not. Daniel watched a guard scan a crate, then scan it again like the machine might change its mind. Reyes turned to Daniel. You are coming with me, he said. Director Hargrove wants clarity. Inside the trailer, the air was colder than outside. Mira Dellin stood by a monitor showing a camera view of the sample vault. It was a squat concrete building ringed with temporary fencing. Red icons blinked on the screen. Silent warnings. We had an unauthorized access attempt last night, Mira said. To the sample vault? Daniel asked. Mira nodded. Someone tried to spoof the gate lock and camera feed. She said, the attempt failed, but the intent is clear. Daniel felt his throat tighten. You think I did it? He asked. Mira did not answer directly. She placed a printout on the desk, a grid of timestamps and device identifiers. Daniel recognized his own project tablet and his truck transponder. 2 unknown signals sat beside them, moving near the vault perimeter at midnight. Your access level is unusual for a civilian in a sealed zone, Mira said. I have a project badge because you still want the soil pumps running, Daniel said. The speaker clicked. Director Elaine Hargrove joined without raising her voice. The calm tone made Daniel feel like he was already being measured. Mr. Park, your proximity to the subject is not the issue. Elaine said, your proximity to the evidence is. The evidence is dirt, Daniel said, local dirt. It is not local anymore. Elaine said, once an off-world party expresses intent, the object becomes a potential vector. Reyes spoke carefully. A raider targeted the vault. He said, we need to know if anyone in Sableford Village had reason to assist. Daniel looked at the screen. The unknown signals were not his. He could say that, but denial without proof was just noise. He thought of Lyra in her sealed room, watched by a camera. He realized how easy it would be to write a story where she had engineered the raid. Where is Lyra now? Daniel asked. Contained, Elaine said. Her contact privileges are suspended. You are isolating her to force her to panic, Daniel said. I am isolating her to reduce variables. Elaine said, panic is her choice. Outside the trailer, a sudden shout rose from the checkpoint. Daniel saw guards running toward the barricade and villagers stepping closer. Anger heated like a pot left unattended. A small boy slipped through legs, and his mother grabbed him back with a frightened cry. Reyes looked through the window. We have a crowd problem, he said, and now we have a trust problem. Public Health Liaison Office will broadcast a warning. Mira said, they will tell people the raid proves hostile intent. Daniel heard his own name again, now in a harsher tone. He understood the trap. If he defended Lyra, he became the weak link. If he stayed silent, he became a bystander to her slow death. Let me speak to her, Daniel said. If you want variables reduced, you need information. Elaine replied, information is not the same as persuasion. You will get a monitored call, she added. 1. The next night, the sample vault lights flickered once, then steadied, and someone used that moment. Daniel did not see the raid begin. He saw the aftermath. That is how most disasters arrive in small places. A siren sounded for 30 seconds and stopped, leaving the village to guess what was true. Reyes met Daniel at the vault perimeter with a flashlight beam that shook slightly in his hand. The temporary fence had been cut cleanly at a corner, then tied back in place, like the intruder wanted time more than chaos. A camera pole lay tilted, its power cable severed. No shots fired, Reyes said, no casualties. Whoever did this knew our habits. Daniel looked at the concrete door, the bioseal strip intact. Did they get inside? He asked. Mira arrived in a vehicle with tinted windows. She stepped out already reading data on a tablet, face calm in a way that felt rehearsed. They did not breach the inner seal, Mira said, but they reached the external staging area. They mapped our lock timing, she added. Daniel felt the ground shift under him. So it was practice? He asked. Mira nodded. Or reconnaissance, she said. Reyes turned his beam toward Daniel. You understand what this does to your village? He asked. They will say you invited a raid. I did not invite anything, Daniel said. Reyes lowered his voice. Then tell me who did, he said. Daniel had no answer. He looked at the neat cut, and he thought of a professional hand. He thought of the relief fleet of Vesh in orbit, and of the schedule Varric had promised. The raid had been quiet, controlled, and indifferent to the fear it would cause. Back in Sableford Village, the broadcast came before sunrise. A calm voice read instructions about washing hands and reporting outsiders. It announced an attempted breach had occurred, and that tighter containment was necessary. Daniel listened from his kitchen. Lights dimmed to save power. The broadcast never said his name, but the village did. A knock came at his door. Then another. A neighbor stood outside, eyes hard. People say you brought this here, the man said. They say you let her in. I brought her to Dr. Hannah Vu because she asked for a lawful path. Daniel said, that is all. The neighbor glanced past him, scanning Daniel's home like it might hide contraband. Lawful, the man said, tell that to my wife. She cannot get her insulin. Daniel wanted to say the truck had been delayed by policy, not by Lyra. He wanted to say fear was being used as a tool. Instead, he nodded. Anger needed a place to land, and it was landing on him. That afternoon, Daniel got his monitored call with Lyra. A camera watched from the corner of the small room. A guard stood close enough to hear every word. Lyra's face appeared on a screen, paler than before, hair tied back, eyes still steady. Behind her was a blank wall and a faint shadow that could have been another guard. "Are you safe?" Lyra asked. "No one is safe," Daniel said. "They tried to raid the sample vault." Lyra held still. "My people?" she asked. "I do not know," Daniel said, but it was professional, quiet, like someone testing locks. Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them. "Varric is running out of patience," she said. "He will not wait for permission." "Can you stop him?" Daniel asked. "Not from this room," Lyra said, "and not without paying for it." The guard shifted. Daniel lowered his voice anyway. Like softness could hide meaning. "If they paint you as a threat, they will never negotiate," Daniel said. "Then we do not give them a story," Lyra said. "We give them a protocol." 2 days later, the first hard proof arrived, and it did not come on paper. It came as a clean landing in the marsh flats beyond Brinefield Delta. Far enough from the village to avoid the main cameras. Close enough to remind everyone of reach. The craft did not scorch the ground. It set down with a controlled hiss and a thin mist that could have been cooling vapor. Reyes received the alert and deployed with speed that felt like fear disguised as efficiency. The quarantine fence line expanded that same hour, cutting off a wider ring of farms and water channels. Families who had survived the first lockdown now found themselves inside a second one. Elaine's voice came over the command channel, crisp and immediate. "No engagement unless fired upon," she said. "Contain the site and identify the unit." Captain Juno Rask stepped out of the craft first. Juno wore a plain protective suit with no symbols that could be mocked as military pride. Behind Juno, 3 figures followed carrying hard cases that looked like scientific equipment. The group moved with careful spacing, trained to treat breath as a risk. Juno raised empty hands as Reyes' team arrived. "We are Sample Recovery Unit," Juno said. "We are not here to harm civilians." Reyes kept his weapon down but ready. "You are trespassing," he said. "You are escalating." "We are minimizing damage," Juno said. "You are delaying until our children starve." Elaine joined through a secure line. "Chancellor Soren has no authority here," she said. "Stand down and depart." Juno looked at the camera, not at Reyes. "Director Hargrove, we have orders," Juno said. "We will take microbial samples and leave. We will avoid lethal force unless you force it," Juno added. "You are calling theft mercy," Reyes said. "Call it what you want," Juno said. "I call it survival." The standoff held for seconds that felt longer than they were. Then a small device rolled from the Vesh team toward the ground between them. Not a bomb, not a weapon that screamed violence. It released a cloud that made Reyes officers cough and blink. A non-lethal irritant meant to create space. Daniel learned about it later, because by then he had been pulled in again. Elaine wanted him present, a civilian witness to prove Earth was being restrained. Daniel stood behind Reyes and watched professional restraint meet professional desperation. The Vesh unit moved fast, not toward the village, but toward marsh soil and canal edges. They took samples in a pattern, sealed them in BioSeal canisters, and placed them into a cold chain field caddy. Their hands never touched bare earth. "Stop, you are contaminating a controlled zone," Reyes shouted. "We are following sterile protocol," Juno said without turning. "Your zone is political. Our deadline is physical." Elaine's response hit Sableford Village immediately. Curfew tightened. Fuel rationing began. The clinic was ordered to log every dose of medicine and report every cough. The supply line slowed further, because every crate now required double inspection. Daniel watched a mother beg a guard for baby formula at the checkpoint. The guard said no with eyes that looked ashamed. He saw a fisherman shove a cart in anger and get shoved back. He saw the village become a pressure cooker. He saw Lyra's face on the screen in his memory, telling him not to give them a story. The midpoint of the crisis became clear in one quiet thought. Earth was right to fear a biological disaster. Vesh was right to fear extinction. Their rightness did not cancel the suffering in the middle. On the 5th night after the landing, Daniel made a choice that would stain him either way. He met Dr. Hannah Vu in the back of the Mudroot Microbial lab. The lights were off. The sterile hood ran low, its hum masked by rain. Lyra was there too, released for a monitored consult under armed escort. Elaine believed controlled contact reduced unpredictable behavior. The escort stood by the door, listening without pretending otherwise. Hannah laid out the sterile sieve kit, new gloves, and a fresh stack of Bioseal canisters. If you take from one spot, you wound that spot, Hannah said. If you take a little from many microsites, you spread the stress. You reduce damage, she added. You are asking me to help transfer, Daniel said. I am asking you to prevent a raid from becoming routine, Hannah said. If we build a protocol, we remove the excuse for force. Lyra looked at Daniel, eyes steady. I will accept any oversight, she said, but Varric will not wait for perfection. If we do this, what happens to you? Daniel asked. I become a liability to both sides, Lyra said, but if we do nothing, I become a witness to my world dying. The guard shifted weight, a reminder that their words had weight beyond the room. Daniel chose his next words carefully. We take samples under Hannah's method, Daniel said. We keep them sealed and documented. We present them as a draft shipment, not a theft, he continued. We force both sides to decide in daylight. Hannah nodded once. We do it before dawn, she said, when the checkpoint rotation changes. Lyra's voice softened. Daniel, do not do this for me as a romance, she said. Do it because it is the least harmful path. I am doing it because harm is already here, Daniel said. They moved before dawn in a project truck marked Coastal Soil Renewal Initiative. The sign still opened some gates. Hannah sat in the passenger seat, breathing slow. Lyra sat in the back with the cold chain caddy and canisters. Posture straight like her spine could hold the plan together. At the first checkpoint, a young guard recognized Daniel. His eyes flicked to the sealed case in the back, then to the escort officer beside it. The guard swallowed. We are under stricter orders now, the guard said. We are responding to stricter reality, Daniel said. Dr. Vu is taking baseline samples for contamination tracking. The guard hesitated, then waved them through. They stopped at 3 sites along Brinefield Delta, never taking much from any one patch. Hannah guided scoop depth, spacing, seal timing. Lyra logged each sample with location notes and temperature readings, not as a thief, but as someone desperate to be credible. As they worked, a distant thud rolled across the marsh, not loud enough to be thunder. The escort officer stiffened and looked toward the horizon. Daniel felt his chest tighten. That is not weather, Lyra whispered. They hurried, sealing the last canister with hands that did not shake. Shaking was wasted energy. When they returned toward Sableford village, the checkpoint lights ahead dimmed once, then went out. Barrier arms dropped, not from a command, but from power loss. Portable scanners died with a soft chirp. In the darkness, voices rose, confused, frightened, then angry. A child cried somewhere near the clinic, a high thin sound that cut through adult shouting. Daniel saw flashlights bobbing like fireflies. He realized how fast a blackout turned order into rumor. The escort officer spoke into a radio that did not answer. Quarantine Operations Command, respond, the officer said. We have power failure across the line. No response came. Hannah gripped her seatbelt. If the cold chain warms, the samples degrade, she said. If we get stopped in a crowd, the seals will not matter. Lyra leaned forward, voice low. Daniel, we should turn back, she said. If this becomes chaos, you will be blamed for everything. Daniel stared at the dark road ahead. He heard the baby crying again. Then another child joined, like fear had a chorus. If we turn back now, force will return, Daniel said, and next time it will not be quiet. They rolled forward at walking speed through the blacked-out checkpoint. Headlights cut a narrow tunnel. People looked into the truck, saw the sealed case, and their faces hardened into assumptions. Someone slapped the side panel. Another voice shouted Daniel's name. He did not stop. Stopping meant being surrounded. Being surrounded meant losing the only thing they could still control. Behind them, the village generator sputtered, coughed, and fell silent again. In the sudden dark, the crying sounded closer, and Daniel knew the night had changed them. The morning after the blackout, the village smelled like damp diesel and fear. Namaru Provincial Road 9 was open again, but only in the way a cage door is open when the bars stay. Technicians restored the lights, and the Quarantine Operations Command trailer hummed with fresh power. The crowd at the checkpoint was quieter now, not calmer, exhausted. Daniel walked past faces that used to greet him with small talk about weather and crops. Now the looks were sharp and measuring, like every word could be recorded and replayed. He kept his hands visible, badge forward, and his mouth shut until the last guard waved him through. Inside the trailer, Director Elaine Hargrove sat at a folding table like it was a permanent desk. A sealed case sat beside her, and a bioseal strip on the lid glowed faintly. Dr. Hannah Vu stood near a whiteboard holding papers. Lyra sat on the other side of the table, escorted by 2 officers. Mira Dellin watched from the corner. Tablet ready, expression flat. "We're going to stop improvising," Elaine said. "Then we need a protocol that makes force unnecessary," Hannah said. Elaine waited. Hannah slid the first page forward. "The Microbial Accord draft," she said, "sampling by region, not by a single hotspot. A hard limit on quantity." Hannah continued. "A replenishment plan so the delta is not stripped. Full disclosure of sequence profiles posted publicly." She added, "Chain of custody from field to vault to transfer." Daniel watched Elaine read. Her eyes moved fast, hunting for leaks and loopholes. "I accept strict oversight," Lyra said. "I accept quarantine steps. I accept monitoring during collection and transport." She continued. "You accept because you need this," Elaine said. "Acceptance is not proof of safety." "What is your alternative?" Daniel asked. He kept his voice respectful. "Raids will continue," he said. "The relief fleet of Vesh will push harder. Or you push harder and turn this into a soft war that becomes a real one." Daniel added. "Public Health Liaison Office is already messaging the raid as hostile intent." Mira said. "Public tolerance is shrinking. The village is at a breaking point," Reyes said from the door. "You are asking me to trust an off-world party with a biological asset," Elaine said. "You are asking me to do it under cameras while my own citizens panic." "I am asking you to choose the least harmful option," Daniel said, "because the harmful options are already happening. The least harmful option is the one with the smallest unknowns," Elaine said. "That is why we make unknowns visible," Hannah said. "We publish the data. We publish the quantities and steps." Hannah continued. "If anyone lies, the lie becomes measurable. We also submit to third-party audits," Lyra said. "Earth experts and Vesh experts side by side." Elaine paused. The trailer fan filled the silence. Outside, a loudspeaker repeated hygiene instructions like a prayer. "I will consider this," Elaine said, "but I will not consider it on sentiment." "Good," Daniel said. "Sentiment cannot stabilize a supply chain." Lyra looked tired, not prison tired, holding back begging tired. Elaine slid the papers back toward Hannah. "You will revise with my conditions," Elaine said. "There will be no unsanctioned movement until I sign off." "What conditions?" Hannah asked. "All samples pass through a quarantine station under my control," Elaine said. "No exceptions. Every person involved signs a non-disclosure commitment." Elaine continued. "Violations will be prosecuted." Daniel felt the word prosecuted tighten his chest. Hannah nodded once, like she had expected the caller. "If we cannot speak, we cannot build trust," Lyra said. "You will build trust with data, not speeches," Elaine said. Reyes looked toward Daniel. "You wanted daylight," Reyes said quietly. "This is daylight." Daniel knew he had pushed the door open. Now the door had a lock on it. By the second evening, the cold chain caddy started to feel like an hourglass. Hannah and Daniel stood in the Mudroot Microbial lab watching the temperature indicator on the insulated case. Power in Sableford Village was stable again. But stable did not mean strong. Each time the clinic refrigerator cycled, lights in nearby homes dimmed for a breath. If the transfer is delayed too long, viability drops, Hannah said, not dead, but weaker. We send weak, and Vesh calls it sabotage. Hannah added. If we rush, Earth calls it a breach. Daniel said. Lyra sat on a stool, wrists unbound but watched by a guard at the door. The camera blinked its patient red dot. She had learned to speak like every sentence might be played in a tribunal. Varric will not accept delay. Lyra said. He will read delay as refusal. Can you talk to him? Daniel asked. I can request a channel. Lyra said. He can ignore it. A secure phone buzzed. The guard answered it, then handed it to Lyra while staying close enough to hear. Lyra held the receiver. Chancellor Varric Soren, she said. A voice came through, calm and dry, like a manager checking a late shipment. Princess Lyra Vesh, Varric said, report. Earth authorities are drafting a supervised agreement. Lyra said, they demand quarantine handling and a silence commitment. They will not tolerate independent action. She continued. Silence is a tool, Varric said. Earth wants time. We do not have it. We need the agreement to prevent more raids. Lyra said, your last action increased fear and tightened quarantine. Fear is their choice, Varric said. Extinction is ours. If they delay beyond the window, sample recovery unit will complete collection at minimum harm. Varric added. You promised restraint, Lyra said. Restraint is not surrender, Varric said. How many days until decision? Lyra glanced at Daniel, then Hannah. They will not promise days. She said, they will promise process. Then process will be outrun. Varric said. The call ended without farewell. Lyra lowered the receiver carefully, like anger might spill if she moved too fast. He is turning you into a symbol, Daniel said. Earth is also turning me into a symbol, Lyra said, an example of why fear is justified. Hannah opened a folder and slid a revised draft across the bench. Director Hargrove wants the quarantine station as a choke point, Hannah said. Every sample goes through her hands. And everyone signs silence, Hannah added. She is building control, not trust, Daniel said. She is building a system that survives bad actors, Hannah said. Trust does not scale, systems do. A knock came at the lab door. Deputy Marshal Colm Reyes entered, hat in hand, face tight. He did not sit. He spoke like a man delivering news that would make him unpopular. Director Hargrove has expanded the cordon again, Reyes said. No one moves after dusk. Fuel rationing is tighter, Reyes continued. Anyone caught outside approved routes will be detained. Because of the Vesh landing team? Daniel asked. Because the village is cracking, Reyes said. Fights at the checkpoint, a stolen medicine crate. People are blaming you, blaming her, blaming each other, Reyes added. I am trying to keep this from turning into blood. If Earth tightens, Vesh will push, Lyra said. Reyes looked at her, then away. I know, he said, but my orders are my orders. Daniel watched Reyes leave and felt something harden in him. He had believed projects were about patience and process. Now patience was a weapon used to win time from the weak. Hannah checked the caddy again. The temperature had climbed by a small margin. Not a crisis yet, but a warning. If the sample fails, Varric will claim betrayal, Lyra said. If the sample succeeds, Elaine will claim she contained it. And what do we become? Daniel asked. We become the story they tell to justify what comes next, Lyra said. Near midnight, the first trial movement began, and it ended with a siren and a signature. The plan was supposed to be simple. A small set of samples collected under Hannah's method would be transported to a temporary quarantine station near the sample vault. There, Earth would verify seals and viability. Then they would schedule a supervised transfer window to Vesh custody under the draft accord. Nothing felt simple when the road was blocked by human anger and metal barricades. Daniel drove the Coastal Soil Renewal Initiative truck with Hannah in the passenger seat and Lyra in the back. An officer escorted them. The cold chain caddy sat strapped down. Temperature stable for now. The village was dark except for checkpoint lights and the glow of phones in people's hands. As they approached the checkpoint, a crowd stepped into the lane. Not a mob with weapons. Neighbors with tired faces. A man raised his arms. "No more taking," he shouted. "No more experiments. We are the ones trapped." Daniel rolled down the window. "This is to stop raids," he said. "This is to end the lockdown." "End it for who?" a woman yelled, voice cracking. "My child is coughing and the clinic says wait." Reyes pushed through the crowd. Flashlight sweeping faces. "Clear the lane," he said. "Now." Someone shoved the barricade toward the truck. The escort officer shouted. A guard lifted a weapon. Not aiming yet, but the gesture turned fear into motion. "Do not push forward," Hannah whispered. "We will run someone over." "I know," Daniel said. The cold chain indicator beeped once. A soft alert that the lid seal had been jostled. Hannah's eyes widened. She reached back, steadying the case with one hand while gripping her seatbelt with the other. A rock struck the side mirror and shattered it. The sound snapped something in the crowd. People stepped back, then surged forward again, like their bodies had decided for them. "Back up," Reyes shouted. "Back up now." A teenage boy darted toward the truck bed, fingers reaching for the latch. The escort officer moved fast and grabbed the boy's wrist. The boy jerked free and fell, scraping his knee. He screamed, not from pain, but from humiliation. In the confusion, a portable light pole toppled. The bulb shattered. Sparks fell onto wet ground and died with a hiss. For a moment, it looked like gunfire in the dark. That illusion was enough. A guard fired a warning shot into the air. The sound punched the night. The crowd froze, then scattered in panicked bursts. A child began to cry, loud and relentless. The crying did not stop when the lane cleared. It stayed like a reminder that adults were failing. Reyes ran to the guard and grabbed his arm. "No more shots," Reyes said. "They were rushing the vehicle," the guard said. "And you just gave the rumor its proof," Reyes said. Daniel drove forward slowly. His hands shook on the wheel even as he tried to keep them steady. At the edge of the checkpoint, the truck hit a pothole hidden by rain. The jolt made the cold chain caddy thump against its strap. Hannah gasped. She opened the lid just enough to check the inner seal. Her face went pale. "The outer seal cracked," Hannah said. "The inner canisters are still sealed. But this looks like tampering now." "It was a pothole," Daniel said. "It will not matter," Hannah said. "To Elaine, an imperfect seal is a breach. To Varric, an imperfect seal is sabotage," Hannah added. They reached the quarantine station near the sample vault, a temporary structure with white lights and a table lined with inspection tools. Mira Dellon met them there with two technicians. Elaine appeared on a secure screen, expression unchanged. "Set the caddy on the table," Elaine said. Hannah did so, hands careful, voice steady. "The inner canisters remain sealed," Hannah said. "You can verify each strip." Mira inspected the cracked outer seal and glanced up. "This will be reported as a handling failure," Mira said. "It happened at the checkpoint," Daniel said. The crowd surged. A warning shot was fired. "The road was unsafe," Daniel added. "Your judgment was unsafe," Elaine said. Hannah swallowed once, then spoke before Daniel could. "I take responsibility," Hannah said. "I designed the method and supervised the movement. If you need a person to hold accountable, it is me," Hannah added. "Hannah, no," Daniel said. "If they arrest you, the village will tear itself apart," Hannah said. "If they silence Lyra, Vesh will raid again," Hannah continued. "You are still useful, Daniel. I can survive being blamed." "Dr. Vu, you violated a containment environment by attempting transport without finalized authorization," Elaine said. "I attempted transport to prevent further raids," Hannah said. "Intent does not override procedure," Elaine said. "Deputy Marshal Reyes will detain you pending review." Reyes stepped forward. pain in his eyes. Dr. Vu, please come with me, Reyes said. Hannah nodded once and removed her gloves, folding them inward, like she wanted her last gesture to be clean. She looked at Daniel. Keep the draft alive, Hannah said. Lyra stood from the back corner. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. Director Hargrove, if you punish the only person trying to build a lawful path, you will force my world to choose force, Lyra said. Your world already chose force, Elaine said. Then I will choose something else, Lyra said. She looked into the camera like it was a window to orbit. Captain Juno Rask, stand down, Lyra said. By authority of the Vesh Regent Court, you will cease all recovery actions until the accord window is decided. You have that authority? Mira asked. I have enough authority to create consequences, Lyra said. And what consequences do you accept for interfering with your own side? Elaine asked. Exile, Lyra said, and I accept it. Daniel felt the word land like a door locking behind her. Reyes led Hannah away. Daniel stood by the table as technicians inspected each canister strip in silence. The draft accord sat on the edge of the table with Hannah's handwritten notes, dampened at the corner by rainwater. Outside, the village remained sealed, but the night felt different. Not safer, not kinder, closer to a decision that could not be postponed. Just before dawn, the sky over Brinefield Delta looked too orderly to be natural. Daniel stood on the levee with salt wind stinging his eyes. Above the cloud line, faint metallic glints held position like quiet punctuation. They were not stars, and everyone in Sableford Village had learned to recognize the difference. The Quarantine Operations Command trailer flashed new alerts every few minutes. Reyes and Mira moved between screens with tight focus. Elaine spoke over secure audio, words clipped and precise. Relief fleet of Vesh is adjusting orbit, Elaine said. They are not drifting, they are staging. Are they preparing another landing? Reyes asked. Trajectory suggests a corridor aligned with our vault perimeter, Mira said. If they descend, it will be fast. Daniel heard his own breathing and hated that it was loud inside his head. He thought of Hannah in detention, accused of failure that had been fear and potholes, not malice. He thought of Lyra, exiled by her own court in the same breath she tried to stop a raid. Lyra was in a small interview room now, not chained but contained. A camera watched her face like a scope watches a target. Daniel had been granted monitored presence because Elaine wanted a civilian witness again. Daniel felt used, and he stayed anyway. Varric is moving pieces, Lyra said. He wants you to feel the clock. Can you contact Captain Juno Rask? Daniel asked. I can try, Lyra said. I can also fail. A secure line opened, the screen filled with shipboard feed. Clean lighting, hard edges. Captain Juno Rask stood in a plain uniform, posture straight, eyes tired in a controlled way. Princess Lyra Vesh, Juno said, you should not have access to this channel. I am still a princess, Lyra said. Exile does not erase my voice overnight. Chancellor Varric Soren has issued an operational directive, Juno said. Sample recovery unit is authorized to complete collection if Earth does not sign. Lyra's hands did not shake, but they curled slightly, like she had to hold herself still. Captain, stand down, Lyra said. Hold position, no descent, no ground action. By what authority? Juno asked. By authority of the Vesh Regent Court under Emergency Preservation Clause, Lyra said. Record this order and acknowledge receipt. Silence held. Juno was not a villain. Juno was a blade held by someone else. If I comply, I may be charged with refusal, Juno said. If you proceed, you may trigger war, Lyra said. You will still not get a stable sample stream. You will get panic, contamination risk, and an Earth that never trusts you again, Lyra added. Juno's eyes flicked off screen, like someone was speaking in an earpiece. Chancellor Varric Soren is present on command channel, Juno said. He requests you withdraw your order. I will not, Lyra said. A new voice joined, crisp and unhurried. Varric did not sound angry. He sounded like a person refusing to waste time on emotion. Princess Lyra Vesh, you have made yourself a liability. Varric said, Earth is delaying. Children are starving. Varric continued, I will not let a signature become a grave. Then do not ask for signatures. Lyra said, ask for collapse. Because that is what you will cause. She added, you are choosing Earth over Vesh. Varric said, I am choosing survival that does not poison the future. Lyra said, if you take by force, Earth will harden. Lyra continued, your next shipment will be blood. Daniel felt the ugly recognition that she was burning her last bridge for a probability. Not a guarantee. Captain Rask, proceed to readiness posture, Varric said. Lyra leaned forward. Captain, acknowledge my order, Lyra said, now. Juno stared into the camera for a long breath, then spoke, voice tight. I acknowledge, Juno said, sample recovery unit will hold. Relief fleet of Vesh will maintain orbit and stand down from descent. Juno added. The line went quiet. Varric did not shout. Princess Lyra Vesh will be recorded as obstructing emergency recovery. Varric said, your name will carry that weight. Let it, Lyra said. The feed cut. Lyra sat back, shoulders still, eyes fixed on a point that was not on any screen. Outside, the sky still held those glints. They were not gone. They were only waiting. By midday, the air in the command trailer tasted like burnt coffee and legal paper. Elaine convened what she called a decision meeting, but Daniel could see it was a controlled collision. The Microbial Accord draft lay on the table, revised and annotated. The cracked outer seal from the last movement sat in an evidence bag beside it. Like a reminder that the village itself could sabotage a plan without intending to. You attempted transport before authorization. Elaine said, I can refer this as criminal facilitation. You can, Daniel said, and if you do, the draft dies. Varric moves. You tighten. The village suffers. Daniel continued, then the first gunshot becomes inevitable. Relief fleet of Vesh is holding for now. Mira said. Princess Lyra Vesh forced a pause. That pause is an opening. Mira added. It is leverage. Elaine said. Leverage is temporary. What is your path? Reyes asked. My path is control. Elaine said. Every sample passes through quarantine station. Every handler is vetted. Elaine continued. Every statement is monitored. Silence reduces misinformation. Elaine added. Silence creates rumors. Daniel said. In this village, rumors travel faster than trucks. Elaine's eyes narrowed. Do you have a better method? She asked. Make the process public. Daniel said. Publish the protocol, quantities, seals, timestamps. Publish the sequence profiles. Daniel continued. Publish what you can without exposing security. Put chain of custody in daylight so neither side can lie. He added. Mira looked up. That would undercut panic messaging. Mira said. It replaces fear with routine. Elaine stared at Daniel. You are proposing to give biological data to the world. She said. I am proposing to make the world a witness. Daniel said. If Vesh violates the protocol, everyone sees it. Daniel continued. If Earth violates it, everyone sees it. If you keep this closed, both sides will claim the other cheated. Daniel added. And what do you gain? Elaine asked. Fewer dead people, Daniel said, and this village gains its road back. If we keep the village sealed much longer, we will have violence we cannot control. Reyes said, we are already close. Elaine looked at the evidence bag again. Then at the draft. She was not softening. She was calculating. Dr. Hannah Vu is currently detained. Elaine said, her license can be suspended. Her lab can be closed. If you make her a scapegoat, you erase the only person who can run a safe protocol on the ground. Daniel said. You also tell the village that trying to do the right thing gets punished. Daniel continued. Then no one cooperates with you again. A public protocol also gives Hargrove cover. Mira said. It shows she is controlling risk through transparency. Do not sell my choices as politics. Elaine said. Everything is politics now. Mira said. Even dirt. Elaine sat still for a long moment, then spoke with the same calm she had used since the beginning. I will sign. Elaine said, "Not because I forgive. Because this is lower risk than uncontrolled conflict." Elaine added. Daniel felt air return to his lungs in a slow, careful way. He did not smile. Elaine pointed to the draft. "My conditions remain," she said. "Quarantine station control, strict handling. No private communication with Vesh without logging." Elaine continued. "Public release of selected data only under review." "Agreed," Daniel said. "Selected data, but enough to prevent lies." Elaine turned to Mira. "Open a channel to Chancellor Varric Soren," Elaine said. The screen lit again. Varric appeared, posture unchanged, face calm, eyes sharp. "Earth will proceed with regulated transfer under the Microbial Accord," Elaine said. "No raids, no unauthorized descent. Full chain of custody." Elaine continued. "Public protocol. Public protocol limits both sides," Varric said. "That is the point," Elaine said. "We accept the first shipment window," Varric said, "but delay is not unlimited." "Neither is your orbit," Elaine said. Varric looked at Lyra, who stood behind Daniel, watched by a guard. "Princess Lyra Vesh remains a complication," Varric said. Lyra did not flinch. "I remain a witness," Lyra said. "Do not waste the pause I bought." "Your exile stands," Varric said. "Then let me be useful where I am," Lyra said. The channel closed. Elaine signed the draft with a stylus, then pressed her thumb to a biometric seal. A timestamp appeared on the screen, cold and official, like a door finally opening. Reyes exhaled and did not realize it until it was already out. Daniel watched Elaine and saw no relief. Only the next worries lining up behind her eyes. "Now we execute," Elaine said. "If any of you fail procedure, I will make an example." "Understood," Daniel said. That night, the first regulated run began, and it felt less like a victory than a test. The quarantine station near the sample vault had been upgraded in hours. New sterile mats covered the floor. New seal scanners sat on a folding table. A portable refrigeration unit hummed beside the door, its display steady. 2 Earth inspectors stood ready with clipboards. 2 Vesh observers waited behind a transparent barrier. Hands visible, faces unreadable. Captain Juno Rask appeared in person this time. Juno wore the same plain suit. No decoration, no attempt to intimidate. The professionalism made it harder to hate. Daniel carried the cold chain caddy with Hannah's notes attached in a sealed pouch. Hannah was not free, but she had been released into supervised duty. A guard stayed near her shoulder, and her badge now carried a red mark that meant provisional status. "Keep the caddy level," Hannah said softly. "If the inner canisters jolt, seals can micro-crack." "I will," Daniel said. Lyra stood at the edge of the room under watch, hands clasped. She was not allowed to touch anything. She was allowed to witness. And that felt like punishment designed to look like inclusion. Elaine watched through a glass window, not entering the handling line. Her authority was everywhere anyway. "Begin inspection," Reyes said. The first canister was scanned. The seal strip glowed the correct color. The timestamp matched the log. The sample temperature held steady. The inspectors spoke in short, dry phrases that sounded like comfort because they were predictable. "Seal intact," an Earth inspector said. "Acknowledged," a Vesh observer said. The second canister passed, then the third, then the fourth. The cracked outer seal from the earlier attempt did not matter now because the inner chain of custody was intact and documented. The system found a way to forgive without calling it forgiveness. Juno watched Daniel lift the final canister into a transfer container that would latch to a small shuttle module. Juno spoke quietly, for Daniel alone. "You took a hard path," Juno said. "Do not mistake it for safety." "I do not," Daniel said. "I only needed it to be less deadly." Juno looked toward Lyra. "Princess Lyra Vesh will not be welcomed home soon," Juno said. "I know," Daniel said. Juno hesitated, then nodded once. "We will protect the sample stream if it remains clean," Juno said. "That is the only promise I can make." The transfer module sealed with a soft click that sounded too small for what it carried. Observers signed a digital log. Inspectors confirmed a final temperature reading. The refrigeration unit hummed like a heartbeat. Outside, Sableford Village watched from behind temporary barriers. People were allowed to gather at a distance. Elaine understood something now. If you hide a process, you breed ghosts. If you show a process, you give people something real to argue with. A woman from the checkpoint line held her child close and stared at the module like it was a thief. An old farmer stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes tired. Daniel did not expect gratitude. He only hoped to reduce harm. The module was loaded into a small transport vehicle under escort. It moved slow, not because it had to, but because every slow step was a message. We are not stealing, we are transferring. When the vehicle reached the road, the first barrier arm at Namaru Provincial Road 9 lifted all the way. Guards did not smile, villagers did not cheer. But the road was open, and that mattered more than emotion. Later, in the early hours, Daniel sat on the levee again with Lyra. The sky above Brinefield Delta was darker now. Orbital glints shifted, less threatening, still present. The wind carried salt, but it also carried wet earth smell from a field flushed with fresh water for the first time in weeks. This does not fix everything, Lyra said. No, Daniel said, it only stops the bleeding. Your people will remember the fear, Lyra said. They will remember the warning shot. And your people will remember the delay, Daniel said. Lyra nodded. So we will both carry scars, she said. Daniel hesitated, then asked the question he had been holding back because it was too human to fit inside protocol. What happens to you now? Daniel asked. I stay, Lyra said, at least until the stream is stable. Exile is not a place, she added. It is a door that does not open. And us? Daniel asked. Lyra looked at him, not with fantasy, and not with promises that would break. We do not pretend this is simple, Lyra said. We choose what we can keep honest. Daniel nodded, because honesty was the only thing left that still felt like freedom. At dawn, the first seedlings in a flushed plot leaned toward light that did not care about flags. Somewhere above the clouds, a decision had been made without love, without mercy, and still, for once, without war. The road opened, but the village did not return to normal overnight. People still spoke in lowered voices at the market, and some doors stayed closed a little longer than they used to. Yet the fields at Brinefield Delta began to breathe again. Slowly, the way land recovers when it is given time instead of force. Daniel watched the first green push through rinsed soil and understood what the accord really bought. Not victory, not forgiveness, a narrow, hard-won space where two worlds could keep each other honest long enough to survive. Lyra stood beside him with saltwind in her hair, no longer a visitor, not fully a citizen, and not welcome back home. She had cut her own authority to prevent a war. The cost sat behind her eyes even when she did not speak. Daniel did not promise her an easy future. He only offered what he could actually keep. I can't fix what your world lost, he said. I don't need you to fix it, Lyra replied. I need you to stay truthful when fear gets loud. They listened to the pumps and the distant traffic returning to Namaru Provincial Road 9. Above the clouds, orbiting lights shifted away, still watching, still capable, but no longer pressing their weight on every breath. For the first time in weeks, the silence felt earned. Because sometimes the most human kind of love is not the kind that saves you from consequences. It is the kind that stands with you while you pay them, and still chooses a future that leaves room for others to live. If this story moved you, please take a second to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, because your support helps these quiet, hard-won futures reach more listeners who need a place to breathe.